Committee on Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry to order. And I think the word of this morning is flexibility. We have members that are having to be multiple places at once. Till we get Beam Me Up Scotty, we're just going to keep being flexible this morning. And I'm going to start with Senator Lujan, who has to immediately leave, but wanted to introduce our witness today and nominee today. So Senator Lujan.
Well, Chair Stabenow and to the committee members, thank you for the time this morning and for going out of order. I certainly appreciate that. And to our ranking member, it's good to be with you again, sir. Thank you for this important hearing. Today, I have the honor of introducing my friend, the Undersecretary for Rural Development for the United States Department of Agriculture, Xochitl Torres Small. Her passion and determination have been an ongoing inspiration, and she quickly earned the respect of our colleagues on both sides of the aisle due to her drive to make real progress on issues facing rural America. In her current role as Undersecretary for Rural Development, USDA, she oversees loans and grants to provide infrastructure improvements, business development, affordable housing, community facilities such as schools, public safety, and healthcare, high-speed internet access in rural, tribal, and high-poverty areas. During her leadership, USDA Rural Development secured $2 billion to support rural broadband through the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Torres Small has worked tirelessly on behalf of thousands of Americans who've been the direct beneficiaries of her passion and determination to make our country a better place to live, work, and raise a family. I thank her for joining us here today and for answering our questions. And Madam Chair, and to the members of the committee, for the past couple of months, like all of you, I've been honored to travel throughout New Mexico with listening sessions to talk to farmers and producers about the upcoming Farm Bill. And as we have a conversation and we understand the priorities that families have all over the rural parts of my state, they always ask for one person, Xochitl Torres Small. It's just refreshing when you're visiting with folks who are so busy and so preoccupied with daily responsibilities, but they take time to check on someone that they care about and someone that cares about them. So I want to thank you to our Undersecretary, Xochitl Torres Small, for being with us here today. And I thank our chair and our ranking member, and look forward to a good hearing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. What a wonderful tribute. So thank you so much, Senator Lujan. As we know, our committee has a deep understanding of the vital role that the U.S. Department of Agriculture plays in our country, and from farmers and ranchers feeding America and families trying to make ends meet to the more than 46 million people living in a rural community around the country, the USDA touches the lives of countless Americans every single day. I'm pleased that we're here today to consider a nominee who shares our understanding of and appreciation for this department. Undersecretary Torres Small, welcome and congratulations on your nomination to serve as the Deputy Secretary of Agriculture. Your impressive and wide-ranging background makes you an ideal candidate to help lead the nearly 100,000 public servants USDA has stationed at more than 4,500 locations across the country and around the world. Ms. Torres Small has strong roots in the agricultural community. The granddaughter of farm workers, she grew up in the borderlands of New Mexico and understands both the virtues of and the challenges faced by our rural communities. She's also a trailblazer. As the first woman, the first person of color to represent New Mexico's 2nd Congressional District in Congress. As a Congresswoman, Ms. Torres Small served on the House Committee on Agriculture, showing that she's deeply committed to food and farm policy. She prioritized investing in high-speed affordable internet and modern, reliable water and wastewater systems for her constituents, making it easier for children to learn and farmers to grow. In the summer of 2021, I was proud to support her nomination to be Undersecretary of Rural Development at USDA, a position in which she was confirmed unanimously. At the time, rural communities were still reeling from the pandemic. Her leadership was vital to carrying out USDA Rural Development's mission of providing communities and the small businesses and local governments that lift them up with the support and resources that they need to be successful. Ms. Torres Small's leadership and advocacy before Congress was critical in our efforts to secure $2 billion to expand rural broadband through the bipartisan infrastructure law. During her time as Undersecretary, Rural Development was the first federal agency to invest bipartisan infrastructure law funds in physical infrastructure for high-speed internet. She also moved swiftly to make rural development funding available, which reduced energy costs for farmers and small businesses. Last year, Congress made the largest investment in rural electric since the New Deal. And under her stewardship, USDA has been a leader in developing and delivering these benefits to our rural communities. It's clear to me that Ms. Torres Small has a proven track record as a strong leader, which will be needed as the department faces unprecedented challenges, like tackling the climate crisis and helping farmers manage geopolitical risks. Thank you again for being here today, Ms. Torres Small, and I look forward to hearing about your plans for the department and your vision for the future of agriculture. And before turning this over to Ranking Member Bozon, I do want to say, though, also a thank you to our former Deputy Secretary, Dr. Jewel Bernal, for her exemplary public service. Dr. Bernal was a leader in advancing equity at the department and supporting mental health in our rural and farming communities, and so many different ways was an amazing leader, so we thank her. And now I will recognize Senator Boozman.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for holding this very, very important hearing today, and we appreciate Xochitl Torres Small for being here today as we discuss her nomination for the job of the Deputy Secretary of the United States Department of Agriculture. And we would like to welcome her back to the committee and her supporters. As the second most senior official at the department, the deputy has significant responsibilities over nearly 100,000 employees, 29 agencies, and 4,500 locations in the U.S. and abroad. Managing such a large and sprawling agency is not easy. Upon your confirmation, you will have your work certainly cut out for you, but you will also have an opportunity to improve the operations of the department at a pivotal time. Regardless of agency, employee, or location, our farmers, ranchers, schools, food banks, rural communities, all individuals and organizations that work with USDA deserve to have clarity and certainty at the end of every interaction with USDA. This committee deserves that too. As a deputy, a focus on creating a culture of transparency, accountability, and responsiveness will make that a reality. To this day, USDA has been unable or unwilling to accurately tell the committee how billions of dollars provided during the pandemic have been spent and what remains unspent. We've asked for this information, emails and letters to the agency, only to have the correspondence go unanswered. The lack of transparency about USDA spending, the lack of meaningful response to Congress, and the lack of accountability by USDA is troubling. Let me be absolutely clear. I do not believe that you're responsible for this specific issue, but as the deputy, you must provide leadership to USDA's appointed officials and the career agency heads and create a culture of accountability. We've heard over and over again that the USDA's application processes are too complicated for the citizens and rural communities that need to access them. I know this is a concern that you share within the rural development programs as we visited about extensively. And just recently in a subcommittee hearing held by Senator Bennett, Senator Marshall, we heard very similar comments regarding conservation programs. I've also heard from scores of farmers in Arkansas and around the country about the administrative burden required to access FSA programs. If USDA embraces transparency, accountability, and responsiveness, the department cannot only correct these issues, but meaningfully improve the experience of those that access these programs. Should legislative changes be necessary, we will certainly be glad to work with you to ensure the programs throughout the USDA are being delivered in a timely and efficient manner. Legislative changes without a change to the department's culture, however, will not yield the desired results. I have greatly enjoyed working with you as you have served rural development. I have appreciated your thoughtfulness and your willingness to take the time to visit Arkansas and to understand the issues my state faces, and for that matter, to visit so many areas throughout the country and do the same thing. I believe that you are very well qualified to serve as the Deputy Secretary of Agriculture. I look forward to hearing more from you today and a swift confirmation process. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Before turning to you, I want to submit for the record a number of letters with many, many groups that are supporting your nomination. We place this in the record without objection. And now, before your opening comments, Ms. Torres Small, if you would stand. We have two housekeeping matters. First, we will administer an oath. So please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. And secondly, do you agree that if confirmed, you will appear before any duly constituted committee of Congress if asked to appear? Thank you so much. And now we will proceed and look forward to hearing your opening comments.
Thank you, Chairwoman Stabenow, Ranking Member Bozeman, members of the committee, for the honor to be before you today. I'm deeply grateful for the path that's brought me here. I'm the granddaughter of farm workers, the daughter of educators, and I'm blessed by the love and support of a wonderful husband and family and friends in New Mexico. I also want to thank Senator Lujan for his mentorship and support. And today is Dia de las Madres, so thinking about Dr. Brunau and thinking about the many women who brought me here, I'm especially grateful for that. My own roots are both rural and urban, agricultural and international development, blue collar and white collar. And what I love about this department is that it brings all of those things together. The nutrition that fuels our lives means that we are all, each of us, connected to America's farmers. It's what connects all of your constituents in each of your states. And although I'm sure that your urban constituents may call with very different issues than your rural constituents, we're all connected by land, we're all connected by resources, and we're all connected by food. The position for which I seek might be described as part manager, part departmental ambassador. When it comes to management, one of the first things I learned as undersecretary is to win over the constituents that we serve. It means also winning over USDA employees. I've often told the story about a woman in Alabama who didn't trust the government to provide her clean water because the government had let her down so many times before. And it took a rural development employee knocking on the door and having a conversation with her to get her to trust again. We have the same challenge with many of our incredibly devoted professionals. One of the scores in the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey that they score highest on is the comment, "It's important to me that my work contribute to the common good." In fact, they score off the charts on this. And that is why, because they believe in the work that they do, and that is why I believe in rural development. But I also know that our employees at rural development and USDA face significant challenges, whether it's outdated technology that hinders their ability to comply with congressional directives, antiquated loan and grant applications that mean we're not serving the people who need and deserve our support, and the ongoing need to do more with less, which sometimes means accepting retirements while also maintaining a hold on hiring. That's why I'm eager to work with you, to roll up my sleeves, to be able to do the management side of this job. Because the people of this department, it's the glue. It's the glue that connects our programs together and, much more importantly, connects our programs to the people who deserve our support. So if confirmed, the management side of the position would happily be front of mind for me every single day. The ambassador side of the job, I've learned from you, is important too. It means being a representative in front of Congress, in front of our sister agencies to make sure that they understand farmers and ranchers' needs, and in front of the people that we serve. I would be a proud representative as Deputy Secretary. Now, having run for Congress twice and only served once, I know that you can't please everyone all of the time. But I'm not only familiar with what it's like to grapple with multiple views, I truly believe that that difference of opinion is what makes our country stronger. It allows us to find better solutions, and it allows us to find ways forward that will last the test of time. I've seen that in this very committee, when many of you have pushed me to make rural development programs easier to access, because no one should have to have a team of grant writers to get our support. Now, I know there's still a lot of work to do there, and I'm eager to get to continue to do this work. Common ground is what grounds my work. If we don't agree on 9 things, then I'm hopeful that we can find a 10th thing that we do agree on and work with that. That's why I feel that I'm the right person for this job. That's why I want to do you proud, and that's why I look forward to our discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And in continuing our flexibility this morning, I'm going to defer to Senator Brown to ask the first question, and then we'll go back to regular order. Congratulations. Yes, yeah. Good.
Thank you,
Senator
Madam
Brown.
Chair. I love sitting in this committee and looking over your, not that I don't like looking directly at you, but looking over your left shoulder. And it took Chair Stabenow to be the only portrait here that has actual farm products in it. So it's not a novel, I guess it is a novel idea. So thank you for that. And, from your comments, Madam Secretary, and I know Senator Bozeman and Senator Stabenow and Tina, all of us agree on this, that this committee in many ways is the least partisan committee in the Senate. And almost any time that Wes and I and others come up with ideas in our roundtables or whatever, we go to a Republican in our case and find a partner. And that's why this committee, and that's why the Farm Bill is going to be the best farm bill this committee's ever passed, Madam Chair, in her last 2 years. I want to talk for a moment about East Palestine. I think you know the train derailment there. I go there a little more often than once a month. Today, an important day for East Palestine, and I think for the nation's safety, that the Brown-Vance bill on rail safety, bipartisan, will pass out of the Commerce Committee today bipartisanly, and I think we'll have enough votes to get 60 in the Senate soon. Senator Schumer wants to schedule it as quickly as possible. President Biden has assured us he's going to sign. But I want to talk a little bit about the Norfolk Southern's failures to make appropriate safety precautions. We know all that. USDA's rural development plays an important role in communities like East Palestine. Every time I visit, I hear from residents eager to rebuild their communities and their businesses, wanting just to return their lives to some sense of normalcy, but beyond that, what USDA can do to make a difference in their lives. I just wanted a public commitment from you to work with my office and local leaders and businesses, including credit unions and banks serving these small counties, to convene an economic empowerment forum where the community can come together to learn about opportunities for creating economic vibrancy and prosperity.
Senator Brown, thank you for your commitment to this issue, and also thank you for Jonathan McCracken, who's now the state director in Ohio, working very hard on this issue. I actually spoke with him earlier today, and so do commit to participating in that convening and supporting it, recognizing that he's been on the ground and working very closely with your team from a rural development point of view. And we will continue to work, and I appreciate your focus on this and driving us as well.
Thank you. And Senator Stabenow and her staff know John was with me, I think, for my second month in the Senate until you stole him. So, I mean, we don't think of human beings that way exactly in terms of stealing, but still, okay. 2 months ago, Senators Casey and Fetterman in the state just east of mine and I wrote to Secretary Vilsack and Administrator Regan about the impact that East Palestine trail derailment could have on farmers in our area. I raised the issue with Secretary Vilsack. I have met dairy farmers 2 miles from the derailment who can't sell their milk even though they can test it and it's not contaminated, but who's going to buy milk from a farmer that close? Who's going to buy beef? Local farmers with small beef cattle farms can't sell their beef either because people that have been their regular customers. So we know we need to do some very specific we don't know all the answers by a long shot how to fix this. But would you commit to working with my office and committee staff to provide the kind of technical assistance on changes that can be made so that SDA has the tools to respond to these kinds of disasters?
Senator, from my perspective at Rural Development, we've been working very closely with your team on the existing challenges, both when it comes to water, as well as the community facilities that might be available or support that might be available in the future. I recognize that you're talking about more specifically farm testing and FSA's work, which isn't currently within my purview, but if confirmed as Deputy Secretary, I look forward to working with you on these issues.
Thank you. And in this case, taxpayer dollars shouldn't be spent on this testing. It should be Norfolk Southern. I met with the CEO last week, says to my face, has said publicly they will continue to cooperate, and they are going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to do a lot of this, as you know. Last thing, I introduced, along with several people in this committee, Senator Smith, who's sitting here, Senator Fetterman, Senator Bennett here earlier, and Senator Welch, on our Local Farms in Food Act. Will you work with us to continue to build support for farmers selling their produce locally with food, with food stamp benefits, SNAP benefits available to farmers markets, all the things we do that way. So good, nutritious food stays in the community. The wealth created by that stays in our communities.
Senator Brown, I deeply appreciate your connection to our building a local markets and supporting nutritious food. I'm not specifically familiar with the bill, but look forward to learning more about it.
Will be, Madam Secretary. Thank you.
Very good. Expanding and what we've been doing to build on the local food economy is so much a part of everything. We certainly learned during COVID how critical it was to our access to food as well in local communities. So thank you, Senator Brown, for your work in this area. And I'm wondering if you might speak a little bit. You talked about, as Deputy Secretary, that you'd be the Chief Operating Officer for the department, which is so important, overseeing all of the operations and a workforce of over 100,000 employees, who I think we need to thank every day. They've been through a lot. And we certainly appreciate all of their work. Working with Secretary Vilsack and so on to deliver on the mission. From our perspective, as we write the Farm Bill, the partnership with the USDA has never been more important as we work on all of these issues that are so important. Could you talk a little bit more about your priorities, if confirmed as the Deputy Secretary, and how do you plan to use the lessons that you've learned from your time as Undersecretary of Rural Development as you go to this new role?
When I started working as Undersecretary for Rural Development, I realized that there's a real need to focus on operations because it is fundamental to making sure that rural people have the rural development that they deserve, that there are programs that are easy to access, and although sometimes that's about looking at the regulations, which would come under the purview of Deputy Secretary, sometimes it's also about the technology, making sure that the system that we're investing in works well on the front end for customer service, and that we're prioritizing those investments. Sometimes it also is about having an onboarding strategy that truly prepares the next generation of USDA workforce to be customer service focused and to have those skills to provide that outreach. So as if confirmed as Deputy Secretary, I would want to focus on being that customer service agency that our farmers and rural people rely on, and all of the back end work that supports that effort.
Absolutely. When we look at transitioning, because you've done a terrific job in your current role, and rural development has been tasked with implementing a number of really important things, including the largest investment in rural electric since the New Deal. And so if you're confirmed, how will you ensure a smooth transition with the person coming in after you? And how do you hope to continue your own leadership on rural issues?
Rural development has done some incredible things in the last 2 years, and it's because of a great team. When we look at the work, the investment that's been received through the Inflation Reduction Act, through the bipartisan infrastructure law, being the first to get funds out for infrastructure for high-speed internet, it was a team that worked day in and day out together. My role as undersecretary ended up being focusing on a lot of those operations that would keep our team going into the future. And so one of the things that I did early on is prioritize employee meetings all across the country, because rural development is like other parts of USDA, but pretty unique across the federal government. We have over 450 offices across the country and people living in the communities they serve. So it was really important for me to go and listen to them. And out of those meetings, we put together an executive report called Team RD that identified some of the key challenges that folks are facing, like continuity in the hiring process or outdated technology, and identified priorities for how we can best address them. That was going to be my blueprint for the next 2 years, but now hopefully it'll be a great guide for whoever comes in as undersecretary. We've also set up a state office of operations led by Director Basil Goodman, who's done an incredible job making sure that our field operations remain connected to program design that happens in headquarters. Having that consistent channel of communication will be crucial for the long term.
Great, and thanks. Let me ask a little bit more about local foods, and Senator Brown was talking about that, but local and regional food systems, because obviously USDA is playing a critical role, and there's opportunities now to reach out to support more local processing or regional processing or urban agriculture or a whole range of things that really broaden people's understanding and support for agriculture as well as access to healthy foods. But would you talk a little bit more from your perspective about what it means to be building or strengthening local and regional food systems? And I'm assuming that you will work with this committee and work with me to make sure we are doing that, but would love to have any further thoughts that you have on that.
Rural development has had a great opportunity in the wake of COVID to invest in food system resiliency. And a fundamental part of that is multiple options when it comes to markets. So when I was in Florida, for example, I got the chance to meet a rancher who diversified his markets, investing in the bull line as well as cattle and grass-fed cattle, but also doing a You Pick Blueberry, because he was connecting to and connecting to people who were coming to visit Disney World, but also wanted another experience. And so he was able to keep his farm in operation, even though he was facing significant land pressures, because he was finding ways to connect people to that new industry. I think there's opportunities like that, place-based opportunities in Michigan with cherries, which you take great advantage of, and all across the country.
Great. Thank you very much, Senator Bozeman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Undersecretary Torres Small. We enjoyed you coming to Arkansas and really had a great discussion. Lots of good questions. And one of the things that came up repeatedly was what you said in your opening statement about the fact that you shouldn't have to hire a grant writer to be in a situation to access the programs that farmers and communities, that are out there, but they're so difficult to access. One of the things that the chair and I have been concerned about is getting specialty crops involved, and there's lots of programs for them. But many of these are small producers, and they simply get frustrated. They don't understand how to work the system. Can you describe a little bit about what you've done and are thinking about doing to address this issue, and how those actions will inform other department process reforms if you are confirmed?
Well, thank you so much, Senator Bozeman, for hosting that event, that listening session. So much of the work that we've done at Rural Development has come from sessions like that, where we learn about a problem and then do the investigation of how do we address it. And Reconnect is a good example of how we were able to address some of those challenges. So one of the things we heard from under-resourced communities is that they were having trouble coming up with a match to be able to qualify for Reconnect support for high-speed internet. And so we identified places where it made sense to remove that match so they could gain access, the places that needed it most. Another place that we've been able to make, that we are investing to make it more accessible, is with our most direct customer, people who apply for mortgages through a rural housing program. Through my career, or my service as Undersecretary for Rural Development, we've prioritized investing in a new system that will make it easier, will compare with the private marketplace so that you can apply online. Hopefully you can put in your information, and a lot of it will pre-populate. All of the things that I took for granted when I took out my mortgage, but right now isn't available.
Right, very good. USDA plays a critical role in representing the interests of farmers, foresters, and rural communities in informing other federal agencies' actions that may impact agriculture and rural communities. It's notable that agencies like the FDA and EPA produce better regulations and programs when their USDA counterparts are involved. Examples include USDA's Office of Pest Management Policy's involvement in pesticides, APHIS's work on plant and animal biotechnology, USDA's leadership on codex and food safety, etc. If confirmed, how will you engage other agencies, including FDA, EPA, and the other departments of labor, transportation, to ensure their decisions fully consider the potential impact on America's farmers, ranchers, foresters, and rural communities? How are you going to work with others?
This was a message I heard loud and clear, both in a staff interview and conversations with you and others. And it's something that I care a lot about as well. As rural development, we are the only agency that has a clear mission of serving rural America. And so when the bipartisan infrastructure law passed, and it didn't include money through rural development for water and wastewater, but as someone who cares very deeply about that issue, we decided to work with EPA to find ways that we could leverage our expertise in rural areas and help make sure that states had the resources they needed and the support they needed to invest in rural areas. I'm very proud that the Closing the Wastewater Access Gap has allowed us to partner in that way and find ways to better make sure those funds are working together. I think there are opportunities across the federal government to do similar work where we're leveraging our rural experience and making sure that farmers and ranchers' voices are heard.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Senator Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much, Ms. Xochitl Small, for being here. It's so wonderful to have a neighbor and in this job, and somebody who I know understands well the challenges that we're facing out in Colorado and across the Rocky Mountain West. I also want to thank you for coming to the San Luis Valley and visiting our farmers there, and you have an open invitation to come back anytime you want. We would love to have you. We had a chance to catch up a little bit about the red tape at the Department of Agriculture when you were in my office the other day having a conversation about this hearing, and I recently heard about another case. This case was in Mineral County, Colorado, very, very rural Colorado, my county in my state, with a population of 865 people, which is small, but large at the same time geographically. And Mineral County received a Rural Development Community Facilities Grant. That's the good news. But prior to accessing these funds, they had to draft a request for proposal that took 2 months for USDA to approve. Then they had to advertise the RFP in a printed newspaper 3 times to meet the eligibility requirements. It took this county, with a staff of only 3 people, an extra year to access the grant funds because of these outdated and in my opinion, unnecessary requirements. It would be one thing if they were necessary, but this is, I don't think this is how our rural development program should function. I really don't, and I think we need to. We can agree, I hope, that we need to streamline applications. We need to reduce the burden of our small towns and rural communities and local businesses and family farms and ranchers. And for me, these aren't just words. I've been on this committee for 14 years, and I feel like things really have not gotten better in terms of what our farmers and ranchers are saying. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you're going to approach this question of reducing unnecessary contracting requirements, holding back programs like the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, which you and I talked about when you were in the office, so that we're in a position someday to not have the same conversation over and over and over and over again with agriculture producers in this country who are actually just trying to basically, by and large, do the right thing for themselves and for their families and for their communities. How are we going to know that we're actually making progress, finally, eliminating some of this delay and red tape?
Thank you so much, Senator Bennett, for continuing to push us on this. I think
Well, I haven't pushed on you very successfully so far.
Well, speaking of the community facilities grant in Mineral County, I believe it was a woman from Creed that I spoke to about this issue, and it does appear that we were able to resolve it. However, it
Okay,
took way too long.
you're hired for knowing that, first of all, so thank you.
I spoke directly with her, and it did take too long. And my understanding of what it was it was a design to build plan, and so rural development has some current requirements that are you should have a competitive bid. Now, I agree with you that sometimes in rural places that doesn't work, and finding an engineer is really hard. And so the more you're able to bring us these challenges, we can dig into the details, find out what the problem is, fix it for that person, but also look at the policy behind that, and making sure that, because here there was an exception process, but it was burdensome. So how do we make sure that the exception process recognizes that there's maybe only a staff of 2 people in that office?
I think that I've been around this long enough to know that I think the department is full of well-intentioned people, whether they're in Washington or whether they're out in Colorado. And actually, when I say full, that's not accurate either, because there are a lot of places where we've got empty FSA offices and other offices, and that's clearly an issue that we need to deal with together. But somehow we've got to align or realign, I would say, the incentives at the department so that there is being timely and being responsive and being flexible and being able to especially with these conservation programs in the middle of a 1,200-year drought, we're going to have to figure it out. So I'm now out of time, so I'll send you the other questions, which are about drought and are about our forests, but they're all related, and I look forward to helping you put us in the position to have a different conversation than the one that we have been having over the last 10 years or so. So thank you. Thank you for your willingness to serve.
Thank you very much. And we all look forward to working on these in the context of this Farm Bill. So thank you for your leadership. Senator Highsmith.
Thank you, Chairwoman Stabenow and Ranking Member Bozeman, for hosting this, and thank you for being willing to serve and stepping up, and mainly for your pleasant disposition. And you can just tell you're so willing and eager to do this. That's a great attribute. Undersecretary, Americans' robust science-based pesticide regulatory system is essential to assuring consumers of the safety of pesticide products, which are vital in protecting our nation's food supply. And as you know, the USDA Office of Pest Management Policy develops and coordinates the department's policy on pesticides and integrated pest management. Further, OPMP provides vital input and data to EPA's Office of Pesticide Programs in reviewing the registration and re-registration of crop protection tools. Ensuring EPA conducts a timely, predictable, transparent, and science-based review of these products is critical in order for producers to have access to safe and effective tools to protect against the pest and the diseases. If confirmed, what steps will you take to ensure OPMP continues its essential interagency work with EPA in the registration and re-registration of crop protection tools? And how will you ensure the benefits and impacts to agriculture are appropriately considered in EPA's review process?
Senator Highsmith, thanks so much for this question and your clear attention to detail here. It's something that was brought up also in my staff interview, and was very illustrative of the role that USDA plays in making sure that farmers and ranchers and their opinions are communicated across not just USDA, but across the federal government, and also building a strong system of communication so that we're all working together. On issues like this in the past, I've been involved not with pesticides, but with multiple agency interactions. From rural development, it's one thing I've learned is that communication is key, and that that sometimes even within our own department, we're not always talking to each other. So making sure that we're busting those silos across mission areas is really important so that we can leverage, as you mentioned, the science, the experience, the economics, all of those pieces to look at the issue. So in this case, in regarding pesticides, I did commit in the staff interview to learning more about the issue and making sure that USDA is helping provide in our areas of expertise information to the agency.
Thank you for those comments. As former Ag Commissioner, we've had lots of issues there, and it brings back flashbacks, actually. If confirmed, will you work to ensure OPMP has the staffing and resources that they need? But in your testimony, you mentioned USDA's issues with staffing, retention, and low employee morale. I recently discussed USDA's issue with attracting and retaining APHIS, we call it APHIS, and Food Safety Inspection Services veterinarians with Secretary Vilsack at an Agriculture Appropriation Subcommittee hearing. And I would like to follow up with you. I think it's very important to Congress to closely examine this given the current highly pathogenic avian influenza outbreak, something that used to keep me awake at night. Although APHIS is doing the best they can in the midst of the worst animal health emergency in U.S. history, it's clear that the agency needs to improve staffing resources. Please tell us more about what your plan will be to address these staffing issues at USDA, if confirmed, specifically in regards to the shortage of veterinarians in APHIS and FSIS, and what we as Congress need to consider for how to best support your efforts there.
First, just thank you so much for your focus on employees and that strong connection to customer service that is a fundamental part of who USDA is. In my experience at rural development, I've certainly seen the challenges when it comes to recruitment, making sure that we have the best applicants, as well as hiring and making sure that we are dedicating resources to hiring. It's been a challenge, and I'll just be very honest with you. Sometimes with the budget, we have to hire in fits and starts, and that impacts our ability to recruit because we don't have just a regular system of hiring. So it's something that I've worked to pay a lot of attention to, also on the training and onboarding piece, right? How do we make sure as we bring people on, they have the training for customer service, they know where all of the levers are that they can pull in order to best serve someone, and that they have this strong culture. When it comes, one of the things I've also learned is that each mission area or even each agency within rural development has different needs. In other places, they have the funds to do the hiring, but now it's about building back up that system or making sure that there's adequate understanding of the complexity of the positions so that they're graded at the right level. So one of the things I truly hope to get to work on if confirmed as Deputy Secretary is making sure that the department has the resources to analyze their specific challenges and build a program around the needs, focusing on customer service.
Thank you, and I'm out of time, but I want to submit a question about chronic wasting disease as well, so I'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Senator Ernst.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair and Ranking Member, and thank you, Undersecretary Torres Small, for being here today and for your testimony. And I appreciate our conversation yesterday in the office. It was a really great conversation, and appreciate our shared background of growing up in rural America. And you can tell your love of rural America just shows through, whether it's through your testimony, whether it's through those private conversations, but truly do appreciate you. And we, just personal opinion, but I think we need a lot more women like you serving in agriculture and making sure that our farmers and our ranchers and producers aren't just simply surviving, but thriving. So I'm glad that you are also on that mission with me, and I cannot overstate that point enough. And it is comforting to see your openness, your willingness again to address today's challenges and complex issues to make sure that this happens for those folks living in the rural areas. And on that note, I do want to get into a few more specifics about concerns that constituents bring to me as I'm going out river to river in the great state of Iowa, visiting all of our 99 counties just all across the state. Great people. Number one, will you commit to modernizing and strengthening AFIDA and work with my staff to provide technical assistance?
Thank you so much for bringing up this issue. As a former member of Congress, having served in both the Armed Services Committee and the Homeland Security Committee, as well as agriculture, I certainly understand that nexus of knowing, agricultural land and who's owning it. So I certainly commit to working with you on this issue, learning more about it, recognizing that there are some real challenges.
Yes.
So the challenges we talked about, the paper and the systems, and that there's not a clear one-size-fits-all for all of the different state and local processes for land ownership, but certainly know that this is an interest of yours, and I appreciate the chance to get to work with you.
Great, thank you. And will you commit to supporting animal disease management through electronic ID tag support and new vaccine developments?
This is something that has come on my radar as Undersecretary for Rural Development through meat processing because of the highly pathogenic avian influenza and the challenges there when it comes to meat processing. Although not within my purview, I've certainly seen the impact that education and testing has had in reducing cases for highly pathogenic avian influenza, and also the value of REE in the work that they are doing to address the disease as well.
Good, thank you. And will you commit to sharing overall feedstock availability and the importance of the biofuels market to the rural economy with the EPA as they determine renewable volume obligations?
This is an issue that you and Senator Klobuchar have brought up to me, and recognize that my role currently does not work directly with the RVOs, recognizing that USDA has a lot of information that's important to share as EPA comes to those considerations.
You have a lot of information and great voices as well coming from USDA, and hopefully can help shape and influence the EPA. And then, do you agree that on-farm practices such as no-till, cover cropping, or precision technology help reduce carbon emissions? And if yes, will you advocate for the use of the GREET model to ensure life cycle emissions of biofuels take full account of climate-smart agriculture?
I really appreciate this question. You mentioned my rural roots. My aunt and uncle ranched in Colorado, and I spent summers up there. And I know how hard this work is, and that trusting farmers and ranchers is really important. My uncle really wanted to have a role in preserving wetlands and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And so I think there's an opportunity to work with farmers and ranchers who want to do that. And I look forward to learning more about the issue specifically with you. And
Very good. Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I look forward to supporting your confirmation. Thank you.
Terrific. Senator Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Ranking Member, and Undersecretary Torres Small. Welcome back to the committee. It is great to see you here. And I want to just start by saying I've been so impressed by your work, and particularly your commitment to get out of Washington and get around the country and really listen to people and talk to people. I know as Undersecretary, you came to Minnesota, and we had a great visit. Colleagues, we visited a creamery in central Minnesota that was called 10 Fins Creamery, named after the 10 children, I think, that this dairy had, although they then had 2 more children. So now they didn't want to change the branding, though, to 12 Fins. So, but we had a great visit, and you listened really, really hard, and I appreciated that so much. And also, you came before my subcommittee on housing to talk about the Rural Housing Service, so I want to touch on that in a minute. But I want to start talking a little bit, going a little bit deeper into this staffing issue that you referred to in your opening testimony and that we've been talking about. We all know that FSA and its agents are just so crucial in being kind of a customer-facing tool for farmers and ranchers and producers. And I frequently hear in Minnesota about staffing issues at local FSA offices. There's a need for increased cultural competency as agents are understanding the the world that they're operating in, the different kinds of, the different folks that they're dealing with, and also newer USDA programs, especially the programs around climate smart agriculture. And sometimes when programs get rolled out, not everybody is saying exactly the same thing about them. So could you just talk, Secretary Vilsack, I would add what has mentioned in his testimony about how the compensation structure and the system for Farm Service Agency staff is not as competitive as it once was, and that creates problems for retention. And we have lots of retirements, so it's a big challenge. Could you just talk a bit about what your strategy would be for improving staffing at USDA, particularly at local agencies that are so much customer-facing?
This is a crucial question, and from my rural development perspective, it's exceptionally important because 38% of our employees at rural development are eligible to retire in the next 5 years. And so this is a very key moment where we've got to identify how we're recruiting and hiring the best of the best, how we're making sure that we're training, we're leveraging that incredible experience that's still at rural development to train, and how we're preparing for that loss. One of the things I've learned at rural development is that you have to look at the situation from a few different standpoints. What's our budget to do hiring, and how can we think as flexibly as possible? Where are the other places where other services might be helpful to lighten the load for staff? And then what's the long-term plan about where you want your team to be? If confirmed as Deputy Secretary, I'll be a level away from those plans, but understand the importance of supporting mission areas in determining those plans. They have the resources to do so. So if they are thinking about, for example, the compensation structure, making sure that I'm working with their teams about how to show the complexity of the work that's done, and also what's the ability to progress quickly within a grade level, for example.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with all of that, and I think though we are a policy committee and not an appropriations committee, the discussions that we're having about how we balance, how we set funding targets for agencies, including USDA, I think your points are just so good about how important it is that we set the right targets so that we're not actually cutting USDA, which some would be proposing, but we're figuring out how to make sure that you have the resources to do the service that we need. I just have a minute left, but I want to just thank you so much for your partnership as Senator Rounds and I have worked together on introducing the Rural Housing Service Reform Act, which would be this is our bill to modernize and update the essential programs of the Rural Housing Service, which are so important to small towns and rural places around the country. You and your staff and have been extremely helpful in putting together that bill, which I believe will have strong bipartisan support. So could you just talk a bit about how that work and how important you see it from your perspective in rural development?
Folks don't always know this, but rural development has about a third of the housing that HUD has. They don't always think of us as providing crucial, affordable housing in rural America so that seniors can age in place and that working single parents can own their own home. Administrator El Toro of the Rural Housing Service is working incredibly hard to make sure that these programs are even more accessible. And we deeply appreciate the chance to work with you and provide any technical assistance that you might require on your legislation, and really have appreciated the conversations that we've had so far.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Senator Braun.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I enjoyed our meeting last week. We had a good, lively conversation. As I told you then, the thing I hear overwhelmingly from farmers would be waters of the U.S. That is whipsawed back and forth for a long, long time. Seems to have the rule tweaked or changed depending on which administration is in place. I think farmers are getting fatigued from it. Their job has gotten even more complicated due to current markets and high input costs, all the complications of running that very difficult small business. And by and large, I was sensing a big relief when the Trump rule was acknowledged, trying to implement it. And then, of course, the administration has completely flipped it back to where I think it's going to be in that onerous side to where farmers think it's above and beyond what is necessary. in terms of their own stewardship on their own property. So, couple things. Is there any interest on your part, number one, to listen to farmers, which I'd hope would be, so they can tell you what I hear all the time, that where it's going, they don't think there are marginal benefits to it. They think it's an example of government, being overburdening. And when I look at some of the stuff they're having to contend with, or when I looked at like our own state when I was driving between where I live up to the Capitol and saw probably $200 signs posted all along our new interstate when it was in a little hillside that wouldn't ever have water in it, more than a moment or two during a storm. To me, that was something gone too far. Where are you at on that? It's what I'm hearing. They don't like where the new rule is going to go. Do you agree with the new rule, or do you think it needs to be tweaked to a point of more practicality?
First, I want to respond to your point about listening to farmers. I think that's a crucial part of the work at USDA, and making sure that you're representing, that folks are hearing concerns and ideas and thoughts from farmers and ranchers as they're considering regulation. When it comes, we did speak about waters of the United States when we met, and I really appreciated that. It's something that when I worked for Senator Udall as a field representative years ago was also an issue. And so that question of consistency about going back and forth, I truly understand, because it's not just about the rule itself, but it's about, is there a rule that can settle, that folks can find some peace with and everyone agree on? And that's where the listening comes into play. I think it's important that all of us are listening to each other. I think it's important that USDA communicate in our area of expertise, and then also that we're honoring the science behind decisions as well.
So 50 years ago, when stewardship and conservation and that whole idea of keeping soil on your farm probably had lots of room for improvement, I don't see that. I see most farmers now embracing cover crops, doing riparian buffers, doing grass waterways, doing all the things that looks like they're there 90% of the way. Then I have a local farmer that gets run down by our own conservation officer because he's doing a little ditch maintenance in a ditch that never has any rain in it other than very, very occasionally. I would say, listen, I've not talked to one farmer or one small developer that thinks the new ruling is practical and is going to give marginal benefits beyond the marginal cost. So that's my observation. Do what you said you were going to do. Listen to farmers. Hear it for yourself. The other thing is I have farmers worried about conservation practices being a prerequisite for keeping their safety net in place. Are you for that, or do you think those should be completely unconnected?
I have to admit, this is a place where I don't have a lot of expertise currently in my role as Undersecretary for Rural Development. I have seen a real impact in the value of providing opportunities and incentive-based programs, whether it's when it comes to emergency rural health care, when it comes to grants for meat and poultry processing. I do understand the value of incentives-based, and certainly, if confirmed as Deputy Secretary, to commit to looking more into the issue.
And I think if you do what you said you're going to do, listen to farmers. I'd love to get a report back in 3 to 4 months if they're telling you what I've told you and then what you think about it after you've listened. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Marshall.
All right, thank you, Madam Chairman, and welcome, Undersecretary. It's great to have you back in front of us. Congratulations on your nomination to be Deputy Secretary. We've literally asked some of our producers back home, what questions do you want us to ask you? So these are from my producers. Basically, as Deputy Secretary, you'll be the COO of the USDA. And we've heard from our stakeholders who are concerned about USDA's ability to timely deliver assistance and service to farmers. How do you plan to staff up and ensure USDA remains customer service oriented?
This is a crucial question, and it takes a lot of components, and it's something I'm eager to dive into. A key part of it is making sure that our team has the training and the tools that they need to deliver services timely, that they have the training when it comes to customer service, so they're responding at appropriate amounts of time. Also, there's good communication across the team, so that if someone in the field has a question about how a program is administered, they've got a clear connection to be able to speak to somebody in the national office. And that's a key reason why we established the State Office of Operations, to be able to facilitate that dialogue better. It's also about making sure they have the tools that they need to do the job. So having updated technology systems where it's not, you don't have to open 6 different programs to enter in one thing. And then it's about making sure that we're finding ways to simplify our processes, whether it's how do we get an environmental report that's a little bit, or an engineering report that's a little bit simpler, or that we're removing match requirements so that folks can better qualify for our programs.
Okay, thank you for the answer. The second part of the question is one you and I have talked about several times, and agriculture is not a job that's accomplished well from home. Our farmers and ranchers have to go out and work in the elements every day. They show up and they work literally sun up to sundown. I remain concerned that not just in the USDA, but so many of our departments in Capitol Hill, people are working from home still. An old saying, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. I'm not looking for you to tell me how many people traditionally have worked from home or they're on the road. Are people at USDA back to work in the office yet? How do you measure that? And what is your goal? What do you think it should look like?
I really appreciate you continuing to have this conversation with me, because I agree with you that physical presence in the office matters. It matters that somebody can walk up to a field office and there's somebody there to open the door and talk to them about their challenges. I agree with you that sometimes it's easier for me to walk across the hall and ask a question rather than having to dial them up on Teams. And I've also learned that flexibility is important too. We talked earlier about the challenges of recruiting people, with 38% of our workforce eligible to retire in the next 5 years. One of the first folks I met in Minnesota who had just been hired during COVID, so he was really eager to interact with that arty culture, and he showed up in person at our meeting because he wanted to meet me in person. But he was also asking to meet me in person because he wanted to see if it was at all possible to get a printer at his home, because sometimes it made more sense for him to print out the documents that still have to be filed by paper and go directly to a client rather than having to commute to the office first.
Right.
That flexibility is crucial for being able to recruit and retain.
I respect that, but we signed up for these jobs. I signed up to be a physician. I didn't have the choice of working from home. When people signed up to work for the government, no one said they could work from home. So I don't know. I think that we would be much better served to have our employees back to work. But appreciate your answer. Second question is about the technology you mentioned and just the application process. Senator Boozman was in Kansas recently with me. Over and over, we heard from farmers, we have to hire an accountant to fill out this application form. They become overly complicated. I was working with my son just yesterday on his application for scholarships and school, and there's one form that works for every university. So our office is trying to streamline a uniform type of application process, streamline this. Are you committed to working with us and giving us the technical language to get the job done right?
I really appreciate your interest in this. I think there's a lot of work to do, and online applications are crucial. It's something that we're working on in the housing space. We've also worked on it for the Rural Energy for America program. When it comes to one application for all programs, it can get quite complicated. So, for example, combining our WEP programs for water and wastewater with SRF funds, because each state delivers the SRF funds, it's really hard to create an application that would work for everything. So I recognize there would need to be some really good conversations to figure out what's possible, and would love to have those conversations with you.
Madam Chair, could I have one more question?
Yes, you may.
I'm over my time limit here. My producers back home feel like USDA is not fighting on their behalf when it comes to science. Many of our environmental precision agriculture practices are being shunned by the EPA. We feel like the EPA is not respecting the USDA scientists, especially when it comes to pesticides. We feel like the EPA is ignoring USDA suggestions for atrazine mitigation practices. ESPA has ignored USDA suggestions for 11 safe uses of chlorpyrifos, and the DOJ sent a single email at a late time regarding the Ninth Circuit re-emption case. Will you be our fighter? Will you be there fighting to represent agriculture, my producers, when it comes to working with the EPA and other departments at the White House?
If confirmed as Deputy Secretary, the fundamental part of my job is the interagency collaboration. And part of that from USDA is making sure that I'm listening to farmers and ranchers and rural communities, and also communicating our expertise at USDA to our sister agencies.
Well, thank you so much. We look forward to supporting your nomination, and we know you'll do a great job. And let's look forward to continuing the relationship and working together. Thank you.
Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you, Ms. Torres Small. I enjoyed our discussion. And also, sorry, I just got back. We had a big commerce markup on the train derailment bill that we got through the committee, that Committee Member Brown and Senator Vance are leading, and I'm a co-sponsor, so I appreciate that. You've done a good job as Undersecretary of Rural Development. We thank you for that. And I know that you will continue to be a strong advocate for our farmers, ranchers, and rural communities. My first question as co-chair of the Senate Broadband Caucus is about that area of our work that we're doing right now. I think the pandemic put a big magnifying glass on problems for rural areas. Do you agree that providing broadband internet access is a key rural development priority? And could you talk about getting the USDA portion of the funds out as soon as possible?
First, just thanks so much to you and to Congress for the investment in high-speed internet. I think it is a truly needed thing that we've seen play out in the pandemic, but also since then when it comes to access to healthcare close to home and making sure that folks have good educational resources as well, and the chance to do their homework actually at home. Rural development received about $2 billion in high-speed internet funds through Reconnect, and Administrator Burke has been working incredibly hard to get that out. In fact, we believe that by the end of the summer, all of the funds will be awarded.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Biofuel infrastructure. Last Congress, I led a bill with Senator Ernst that invested $500 million in funding for grants for fueling stations. I know the Secretary knows a lot about biofuels, coming from Iowa. The bill was included in the Inflation Reduction Act, thanks to Senator Stabenow's leadership. Both consumers and retailers are eager to see these funds be made available. Could you work with me to ensure these grants are distributed as soon as possible? Maybe give me a status report on that.
Thank you for that investment and also for your collaboration. We were talking about biofuels earlier as well. It's a crucial part of the Inflation Reduction Act. It's a crucial part of the administration's approach to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And from rural development, I've had the chance to learn a lot about it. We've distributed funds through HBIP previously. We've announced those awards, that availability already when it comes to the Inflation Reduction Act funds.
Okay, thank you. Minnesota's home to the nation's largest producer of sugar beets, something people don't always know. Some of it is so cold in the northern part of our state that it is a natural freezer that goes well into May in the ground. Could you talk about the fact that recently there have been increases in foreign imports above and beyond our WTO commitments? As you know, decisions on the sugar program are coordinated between USDA's Trade and Foreign Agricultural Affairs and Farm Production and Conservation Mission areas. I hope that you will advocate for a seat at the table for any decisions made regarding the sugar program and work to ensure that the program doesn't exceed our import obligations under the WTO.
Thank you for your advocacy on this. This is not something that I'm very familiar with my purview of Undersecretary for Rural Development, but I look forward to diving into it. I am very familiar with sugar beet production and have had good conversation with farmers and their cooperative work in the Midwest. I know that Undersecretary Alexis Taylor is paying close attention to this issue and understands the current stock-to-use ratio is 13.5 to 15.5.
Okay, thank you. Last, as the average age of farmers continues to creep upward, it has become harder for beginning farmers to get established in agriculture. And by the way, there's a lot of answers to our workforce issues in ag country. One of them I strongly believe is immigration reform and looking at lifting some of the caps, as well as being smart about spouses working. And I think every one of our states, from red states to blue and in between, is dealing with this. The other thing we have to do is just make sure those of our beginning farmers and ranchers are able to get into the business. And I've worked to assist beginning farmers by reducing the cost of accessing crop insurance and incentivizing landowners with expiring CRP contracts to sell to beginning farmers. What are your thoughts on assisting beginning farmers to overcome the challenges they face in getting a foothold in agriculture?
From my purview in rural development, I've run into farmers who are trying to add value through our value-added producer grants, for example, and also trying to find new markets. And one of the things when I talk to beginning farmers, the biggest challenge is access to land. So recognizing that need and helping to try, I certainly think there's an opportunity for USDA to support those issues. It's also about, a farmer from New Mexico could tell his story of the development of his farm through the new tractors that he was able to first rent and then buy. And through RMAP, within rural development, there's a very small amount that's able to be used for farm equipment. But I know that working closely with FSA is crucial to be able to support new and beginning farmers.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Lujan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Undersecretary Torres Small, first I just want to say how proud I am to be here today with you. As a New Mexican, to watch your growth, your advocacy for people, and your ability to work across the aisle. It's incredible, and it reminds us of the tradition that's come out of New Mexico with former United States Senator Pete Domenici, former United States Representative Manuel Lujan, who both had reputations of working with Democratic colleagues to prioritize New Mexico and make a profound difference across America. And you reflect the very best of what that means. So I just want to say thank you for continuing to move forward and accepting responsibilities that will transform the United States and transform New Mexico. One area that I've been asking many questions is surrounding historically underserved communities to the United States Department of Agriculture. And I know this administration has prioritized removing barriers for historically underserved communities. And the department recently released an interim recommendation, a report that came out of their Equity Commission. Undersecretary, as Deputy Secretary, how will you work to remove barriers for historically underserved communities to take advantage and be able to access more of the United States Department of Agriculture's programs?
I know there was a subcommittee hearing recently where a fellow New Mexican, hardworking farmer came and testified and talked about how he didn't always feel like USDA programs were meant for him. And that's a statement that I carry with me, recognizing that it's our job to make sure that farmers know and underserved people in rural America know that our programs are meant for them. And that means making sure that we've got the right approach to customer service. It means finding the things that are hard, that are cumbersome, and making them more accessible. And it means working together if there are questions about technical assistance or challenges that might be legal to be able to provide that information. One of the things that I'm really proud of is through Reconnect, we've been able to make that program significantly more accessible by reducing the match requirements and by focusing portions of the funds in the areas that need it most. So I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from Reconnect that hopefully as we look at some of our older programs, because there's 50 programs in rural development, there's even tons more all across USDA, and we've got to look at each and every one and figure out how we can make sure that people know that our programs are meant for them.
I very much appreciate that and agree with that. One other area that I've been hearing more and more about from families across New Mexico, and it turns out that this seems to hold true across America, even with the investment that came with the Inflation Reduction Act of nearly $20 billion, we continue to hear how NRCS is overprescribed. We know that this program can make or break a small, single-use, small farm, small acreage, or a large producer across America. And especially because of the fires in New Mexico, I've learned more and more about the need for improvement with NRCS as well to make sure that it can work when it's needed most. That plus EQIP, I also believe, Madam Chair, that we could be doing a whole lot more for water conservation with another overprescribed program as well. And having irrigated all morning Monday, I certainly know where all the gopher holes are back at home now myself. So I can see how that makes a profound difference for everyone. But nonetheless, Undersecretary Torres, what will you do to ensure that USDA can deliver the critical conservation programs and other IRA provisions needed to support farming and ranching like NRCS and EQIP?
Even from rural development, I know how in demand NRCS programs are. A county commissioner from New Mexico who's in the burn scar came up to me just recently and said, we need NRCS. And one, that speaks to the value of the program, but two, that speaks to the demand of the program. And when programs are oversubscribed, it can be hard to also say we need to make them more accessible. But I understand that and really appreciate your advocacy here.
Thank you very much. Senator Welch.
Thank you very much. I'm proud to be a former colleague, and it's wonderful to have you here. And I also want to just acknowledge the great work that Xochitl Torres Small has done for us in Vermont, paying a visit and meeting with our rural folks. So thank you very much. I just have one question because I think you've covered most of the terrain. Senator Marshall asked you about working back in the office, and I think it's a fair question, and I know it's an issue that coming out of COVID, people with significant managerial responsibilities have to address. And there are advantages to being in the office. There's advantages, I know, in terms of recruiting the absolute best people to have some flexibility. So I know this is something on your mind and on the mind of all of our folks with significant managerial responsibilities. And I just want you to comment on your thoughts on how best to address this and how you would approach it.
I so appreciate how many times you said balance in that question, because it truly is a balance. As a former member of Congress, I know how important constituent services is, and being in the office can make a difference, making sure that people can come and knock on your door. And having the best and the brightest and being able to recruit those folks is also crucial. And that's where, and being able to also retain them. About 2 weeks ago, attended a retirement party for someone who has been working for rural development longer than I've been alive. And he knows multifamily housing inside and out and was helping us figure out how to break down some of the silos, how to make sure that we're entering into contracts and saving multifamily housing properties faster. So when we're trying to keep someone like that and make sure we're utilizing that experience as much as possible, I want all of the flexibilities available in order to leverage that knowledge for the last few years of their work here. Another way that we've seen the flexibility work is actually supporting the RD culture. So, for example, the technology that was provided during COVID, when many people had to work from home, allows them to now interact not just with their office, their area office, but with the entire state, because there's offices all across the state, and then also with the national office. I think that's kind of similar to the challenges that you see with a congressional office or a Senate office, where you're bridging that divide between the national policy piece and the folks who are experiencing it on the ground. So there's all sorts of opportunities that we can leverage if we find the right balance. And if I am confirmed as Deputy Secretary, it's something I'm committed to doing.
Thank you very much. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Senator Fetterman.
It's so great to see you again. I don't even need to wear my glasses. So you came to my office for about 30 minutes, and we had a great conversation. And I have the kind of sentiments of my colleague, New Mexico, beautiful state, and my departed one from Vermont. But I got to honestly say, like, I just believe you're supremely qualified to be this. And I'm really just looking forward to voting for your support. I suspect a lot of colleagues will as well too. And I again, I think we'd be lucky to have you in our service in this your new proposed role. And I'm ceding the rest of my time back to the chair. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I think we have come to the end of the hearing. We want to thank you again for all of your comments and views and for working with us so closely. And I think it's very clear that there is strong bipartisan support for moving you forward to this new opportunity of leadership in the USDA. So this concludes our hearing. The record will remain open until Friday, May 12th at 5 p.m. for members to submit additional questions and statements. And the hearing is adjourned.